My question to the CS nominee relates to just where he stopped on the legal and legislative proposals that he was considering before his exit from the ministry, and more so around the issue of implementation of Article 37 of the Constitution on the right of Kenyans to picket, assemble, demonstrate peaceably. And see, as you have seen in the recent past, a lot of confrontations between members of the public and the police. And it's my view that principally why this has been so is because you have failed to designate picketing corners. And Kenyans imagine you can picket anywhere and everywhere, including in some areas that you consider restricted areas. I would want to hear what is it that you would intend to do if you are reappointed and approved by this committee to ensure that there are no more confrontations between members of the public who want to peaceably assemble and picket and the police. Two, there seems to have been a complete breakdown in administrative and security structures in the country. And I say that in view of when you came into office, the Shakahola massacre, where up to now we don't know how many Kenyans lost their lives in Shakahola. We have seen in the recent past Kware here in Nairobi. In a country like ours, how is it possible where you have chiefs, assistant chiefs, nyumba kumi, and all the structures and security and administrative structures that we have, that 20, 40 people can be killed around one small area like Kware, in the full view of the security and administrative structures without government coming to know. And the same thing happened to Shakahola. And I would want to hear what is it that you would intend to do to make sure that there is restoration of administrative and security structures right at the village level to secure our country.
Mr. Speaker, sir, it is true there is work that requires to be done to ensure that the people of Kenya enjoy their constitutional right and freedom to assemble, picket, and demonstrate and present petitions to public authorities, while at the same time maintaining public order and also ensuring the rights of other people. Before I was dismissed on 11th of July, I had actually finalized the draft regulations to the Public Order Act, which will be the statutory instrument to be processed for purposes of giving effect to the enjoyment of that right, not to curtail that right, because a statute cannot curtail a constitutional right, but to give effect to how that right will be exercised. Those draft regulations, when completed, will be able to help the police do a number of things. Number one, obligate the police to escort protesters and provide security for them, but also to ensure protesters don't run amok and overrun members of the public who are not protesting. Number three, it will require those protesting to notify the police and tell and also give the number of protesters so that the appropriate arrangements are made. It will also obligate public institutions in all arms of government, all public institutions, to designate an area within their premises or within the vicinity of their premises where a group of protesters who want to present petitions can stand, demonstrate, and present petitions to that public office or that public institution. Those regulations also will of course ask protesters to also be responsible for their own conduct, and therefore we hope that if I am approved, this is a low-hanging matter. It's something that we can process in the shortest time possible to avoid a situation like what we've had in the past 1 month of protests which are unmanaged, and which have exposed us to deaths and destruction of property and a lot of inconvenience to the people of Kenya. On the second question by the leader of the majority party, it is true that we have experienced a number of security incidents that should not have happened in the first place. And let me say that first and foremost, the Shakahola incident didn't happen when it became public. It happened over quite a number of years, and it's an indictment actually on our ability as a country to be able to prevent some of these sophisticated crimes from hurting our people. I am on record to having apologized on behalf of previous and the present administration for that breach, because the radicalization and the criminal activity around Shakahola began in 2019-2020. But the manifestation in terms of people dying and being buried was something that happened sometimes in 2022. And the Shakahola incidents will remain the most tragic security breach in the history of our country. We have never had a security breach of that magnitude in our country. We have learned the lessons. 2 days ago, the task force that the president had appointed has helped to give us some of the recommendations on what we need to do to avoid that going forward. But also, we believe that the public officials, including security officers who are in charge, must also have their day in being made accountable. We had proposed the establishment of a commission of inquiry to help us put together the accountability process so that we can have recommendations on prosecution and other action. But the commission of inquiry was stopped by our courts, and we were unable to move. But with or without the commission of inquiry, I want to assure the people of Kenya, if I am approved, one of my priorities will be to make sure that the accountability for the crimes in Shakahola by public officials, including security managers of all arms, of all agencies of the state, must proceed as a way of making sure that we do not have this kind of thing happening again. It is true also recently we had an incident which is actively under investigations around Kware area. Again, the same reasons, gaps in the Ngao and Nyumba Kumi structures, and also our intelligence collection ability. And I just want to say that now that we have finalized the proposals and we know what we need to do to reform our National Police Service, my next assignment, if I am approved by this House, will be to initiate far-reaching reforms in the national government administration system to ensure that we restructure the Ngao system, make it more responsive, modernize it, and distribute it to the lowest level in a manner which helps us to avoid incidents like this when we have serious security breaches, yet we have government officials paid by the people of Kenya to make sure that the country is safe. So I want to admit those were very unfortunate incidents, and national security being a work in progress and a perpetual project, we have learned the lessons, and we are going to make sure that we strengthen and seal the gaps to ensure that we make our homeland safer than it has been before. Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the nominee, Professor Abraham, that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, he is one of the two people who have been reappointed to the cabinet to the same docket that they were serving previously, the last 2 years. I want to ask you a question, Professor, that what do you think makes you feel that you can serve in that docket again? Because why I'm asking that question is because if you look at what happened in the last 2 months in this country, the demonstrations and the kind of things that happened, in my view, you look like somebody who was lost. Your presence was not being felt. Your omnipresence was not being felt, if I may say so, because you could see abductions were happening, human rights abuses were happening, but the minister's voice was not being heard in that situation. What do you think, what makes you think that you can serve again in the same docket? But the next question is that you have also seen widely, you have been widely accused the last 2 months or the last 1 year that you've presided over human rights abuses from time you've been appointed CS till last month. Particularly what happened, for example, on 25th of July 2024. And also during the Azimio demonstrations last year. More than 75 Kenyans lost their lives. And last month also, more than 50 Kenyans lost their lives. So there's a feeling that the National Police response to protest is stuck in the old way of doing things. So the question is, to what extent do you think ministerial responsibility for the brutality meted on Kenyans by security organs? At what level do you think you can take responsibility for that? What new ways are you going now to do to stop that? So my question is, in spite of all these abuses that have happened, in spite of all the problems that Kenyans have encountered, what is this new idea that you will employ this time if you are approved by this House? Because one of the things we are looking at, Professor, Chairman, is the suitability of the person to hold that office. What makes you think you are suitable in spite of all those problems that you have encountered the last 2 months? Thank you, Chair.
Professor, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I was in office for 21 months, 623 days. I can account for each and every day of my stay in office. I woke up every day, and my focus has been to ensure that our country is safe. I have risen before dawn every day, including Sundays, and gone to sleep very late, simply because of the demands of our homeland security. I believe that I am suitable for reappointment because during those 21 months, during those 623 days, I have been able to keep the country fairly safe, especially in the fight against terror. Previously, we had an escalation around 2021-2022 of terror attacks in northern Kenya and the Boni Enclave. And in the past 2 years, approximately, we've had stability in northern Kenya and Lamu. I believe I am suitable, Honorable Speaker, because the crime of banditry has been reduced significantly, in my estimation, by more than 75%, even if pockets of insecurity continue to be experienced. And we do know where the gaps are and what needs to be done to even bring this problem to a complete end. Mr. Speaker, I have visited all the 47 counties, some of the counties numerous times. I've been to Lamu 21 times in 21 months. I've been to Samburu 8 times. I've been to Baringo 13 times. I've been to many other counties. And therefore, I have not been lazy. I've been diligent. And I've conducted myself within the parameters of Article 73, which requires me to conduct myself in a manner that brings honor to the nation and dignity to the office I hold. I have worked with officers at the headquarters, but I've also sat down in numerous meetings to work with officers at regional, county, and sub-county levels to make sure that we share decision-making processes and decision implementation processes. I believe, Mr. Speaker, the question has been directed to the events of the recent weeks. And I want to respond as follows. That the reason that I didn't talk every day is because the events the Honorable Member is referring to were mainly operational issues. The work of the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, as envisaged in Article 245 of the Constitution, is to give the organs of national security that fall under that ministry policy direction and policy guidance, and in particular because we are talking about the police. Mr. Speaker, the police is under independent command, Article 245, paragraph 2. There are only two people who can give the Inspector General of Police directives. First, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, but only on policy issues. Number two, the the Director of Public Prosecutions in matters in investigations of criminal activities. Other than that, operational matters are handled by the command of the National Police Service, and therefore the Minister doesn't give operational directives. We have communicated the policy during my time in office, the policy of the Kenya Kwanza administration on policing, which includes zero tolerance on extrajudicial killings, zero tolerance on abuse of human rights, and restraints in the use of force. Limited only, the use of force being limited only to cases contemplated in the Constitution and the National Police Service Act and the schedule thereto in the defense of life of the officer or the life of the people of Kenya. Therefore, it is unfortunate that during a recent protests, we witnessed the death of 42 Kenyans. We also had injuries, 486 civilians and 385 police officers were injured. We had about 1,387 arrests. We had 54 police cars destroyed and 110 motor vehicles belonging to the people of Kenya also destroyed in those protests. And therefore, I want to submit as follows: that the operational responsibility of policing lies with the command of the National Police Service. It is my estimation that on a broader scale of things, generally, the police tried their best to protect the country against mobs of criminals, arsonists, and other dangerous people, including those who visited parliament and wanted to kill parliamentarians and other people. The police did their best. And in the event, as it is possible, that any officer went beyond what is allowed in terms of the use of force, it is now the work of the Independent Police Oversight Authority and other accountability agencies to help the country to bring to closure the issue of justice for excess use of force. I want to submit as follows, Mr. Speaker, that even beyond the police having independent operational command, the issue of the use of firearms by a police officer is individual. If you read the National Police Service Act and the Schedule 6 to that Act, every police officer has individual responsibility on how they use firearms. You cannot, the Inspector General of Police will not be there to tell the police, the officer, shoot this one, don't shoot this one. There will be an operational order that will generally guide the police officer. So the accountability of the IG will be on the operational order, which is publicly available, whether that operational order met the constitutional threshold, but the use of force by individual officers is an individual responsibility issue. Other than that, I commend generally those officers who tried their best in very difficult circumstances to help the country come to terms with what happened, and hope and will see to it, if I am reappointed, that the accountability for those who violated the law is pursued conclusively. I submit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This question will just require yes or no. So then I'll be able to ask the next one. So Professor Kindiki, are you aware that for the last 2 years we have internally displaced persons in parts of the North Rift, that is Samburu County, parts of Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, and other parts of the North Rift? It's a yes or no?
Yes.
So if this committee finds you suitable to hold this office again, what measures will you put in place to see that these families go back to their homes, and especially going children will go back to school and people can go back to their homes and live peacefully? Mr. Speaker, allow me to ask the last question, which is also, are you aware that there are people in the North Rift who were killed in broad daylight, in marketplaces, in towns, for example, in Samburu West, in Suguta town? There have been abductions, and this current administration, which you served in, during its campaigns and has continuously said that you will not have issues of abductions, issues of extrajudicial killings, but I want to put it across to you that it has been happening. There are people in those counties who are missing to date. They have been abducted. I want to ask you whether you're aware, and we have sufficiently been informed that it is alleged that it is security officers who have abducted these people. Is that one of your measures of ensuring insecurity is settled in these areas? And do you think, as a professor of constitutionalism and ensuring we follow the Constitution, is that the right way in ensuring fair justice even to those who are accused?
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, now that the kinetic operations that we launched in February 2023 has yielded significant fruits, the issue of the North Rift will not be complete until those that were displaced because of the violence meted upon them by bandits, groups and gangs are returned to their homes. And therefore, it is going to be my priority, if I am approved by this House, to make sure that in line with the rights of every Kenyan under the Constitution and the relevant instruments, including international instruments on the prevention of internal displacement, we're going to resettle, facilitate the resettlement and reintegration of all communities that were displaced by the menace of banditry. Secondly, I've been asked to respond to the allegations about abduction. During my tenure as minister, I made it clearly clear to the police that abductions, extrajudicial killings, and extra constitutional means of apprehending offenders is against government policy, is against the Constitution, is against international law. I must hasten to say my observation, because I've been in the front line more than any other place, especially in North Rift, in northern Kenya and the Boni Enclave. The officers who served in the special units in counter-terrorism and counter-banditry, the formed up units, have been quite professional generally. But just as I've said in the previous question, in the event there are any infractions, there are any reported infractions and excesses by the special forces that are helping us to fight banditry, again, IPOA and other accountability mechanisms must be put in place to ensure that we do not spoil the very good work that is being done by our officers in the front line. Some of them have died, others have lost limb, officers have been destituted.
Point of order, Chairman, I was saying that the nominee is a professor, and professors teach in the university, so he can answer questions like somebody who's in class teaching us. I was requesting through the chairman that he can do faster. Chair.
Professor, be concise and precise and to the point.
I submit.
Thank you. Nelson, we'll just come round. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Professor Kindiki, it's unprecedented that twice in 2 years we've had to apply Section 241 of our Constitution in deploying our officers, our military officers, to back up the police, both to quell the protest and initially sent to the North Rift. What exactly is the state of our police force? There are so many things that are flying around, gossip, that number one, our officers, police officers could be demoralized. Number two, is there a situation that you feel the police at some point are very hesitant to execute some of the assignments they are given because of lack of morale? And you as a CS, the accusations that you've not helped in boosting the morale of our police officers. What exactly is the state of our police force?
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, yes, we have applied Article 241 twice. And I think there is nothing abnormal with that, Mr. Speaker, because that is why that article exists. So that whenever there is need, the National Police Service may request the support of the Kenya Defence Forces to handle either an emergency or a disastrous situation. On the case of the North Rift, it was important to get the support of the KDF because at that time the National Police Air Wing had collapsed. Right now it's operational. We didn't have air assets. We didn't have adequate long-range unmanned aerial vehicles, and therefore we needed the support of the military. But the effort in North Rift is police-led. In fact, the military has been supportive in the periphery. It's police-led. Even in terms of numbers, we have 4,500 police officers against less than 1,000 KDF officers. With regard to the recent emergency we had, again, what we had on 25th of June was unprecedented. And our calling of the KDF was simply to put them on standby should they be needed. And you've seen they have not been needed. But it was a precaution because the criminals who wanted to ban Parliament were also threatening to ban State House and other critical installations. So if that was not reason enough to put KDF on standby legally, I don't think any other situation would have met threshold, because what we faced in the last month, in our view, was existential threat, not just to the arms of government, but to the state itself. And therefore, the police is in good shape. There are issues of welfare, which we are handling. I've already mentioned about the salary increments, which we have started implementing. There's issues around housing. There are also issues about the leave and so forth and so on. Medication, I've just talked about the hospital that we've established for them, fully fledged level 4 hospital. We have one for the border police again, which again we operationalized under my leadership in Kanyonyo for the formed up units. So yes, there is more to be done, but it is not true to say that the police force is demoralized. They have done a good job, and when it's necessary, we have called in the KDF in accordance with the law when we feel that the situation is an emergency. I submit.
Hosing.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Professor and Honorable Chairman, I want to rely on section, I'm on this side, Professor. I want to rely on Section 6 and Section 7 of the Act in terms of suitability of the candidate to the position he has been nominated. And in this respect, Honorable Speaker, I want to take the Minister in terms of suitability on his credibility in terms of respecting what he says, in terms of implementing what he says. Because this is the second time he's been given a chance. And Speaker, I want also the nominee to know that absence of war is not necessarily peace. Whatever is happening in the North Rift, Honorable Speaker, there is relative peace. There's no war, but it might not necessarily mean peace. What am I saying, Honorable Speaker? The candidate, as an example, the candidate came to the North Rift. We had engagement as leaders of the North Rift, and specifically West Pokot County, as an example of the entire country. I don't know what happened, so what the minister did in the other places, but possibly maybe he did what he did in West Pokot, which is we agreed on a number of issues, Honorable Speaker, in terms of strategies of bringing peace, including establishment of sub-locations or bringing even the security near to the people so that we avoid the Shakahola things and so on. And the minister agreed with the Honorable Speaker with us in West Pokot. And we also agreed to put security in strategic areas. It might happen in other parts of the country. The minister agreed. And Speaker, nothing happened. Nothing has happened so far. Now, if Parliament sees it fit and approves the minister again for this position, what's going to happen? What is the minister going to do different, Honorable Speaker, to gain credibility among people, among Kenyans themselves, who might feel that the minister lied to them? And finally, Speaker, take home for the minister. This idea of giving police accounting as an accounting or to manage their own money as an accounting officer, I want the minister to take home in terms of the security, the strategic security of this country. What does that mean in terms of security of this country? Going into the future, there are critics, Honorable Speaker, that say, how do you give the police the gun and you also give them the money? What's going to happen? It might pose a serious security in this country going forward, maybe many years in the future. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Professor?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is true that...
Those are just two simple questions. Did you honor what you did and said in Pokot? And is the police fund tenable? Very simple.
Mr. Speaker, it is true that some of the things that I promised have not been realized, especially the issue of operationalization of new administrative units. But it is also true that some of the things I promised have been realized, and I thought the honorable member would be kind enough to notify the House and the country that during the same consultations I had promised that we will provide, train and equip 200 National Police Reservists for West Pokot, which we did. Number two, we had promised to set up a security camp at a place formerly called Lami Nyeusi, which is now called Lami Nyeupe, which we did, and so many other things we did. But the issue of the units is outstanding, and not just for West Pokot, but also for a few other counties, including some parts of Baringo, Samburu, and a few other counties that did not benefit from the operationalization of units, and that is work that we are going to complete if we are reappointed. On the second question, I do not think there is a problem with giving the National Police Service money and control over resources relating to their operations. The operational budgets of the police must be run by the National Police Service themselves, and not by the ministry, not by the office of the president. And in my view, if there are issues of lack of effectiveness, it is not because the police have their own budget. If anything, it should help them even work more efficiently. Therefore, the question should be, now that the police have their operational budget, what prevents them from serving the people of Kenya in a better manner? And those are issues that we'll be looking at if we are reappointed.
In any case, Parliament oversights the use of that money. Gikaria?
Thank you, Chair. Professor Kindiki, in the recent past in this demonstration, two young men, Michael Kihunga Nyagodhie and another young man called Kevin Maganga, were shot dead in Nakuru. The family has been trying to get some information from IPOA. It is alleged that the IPOA is not receiving required information from the police service. This has posed a great challenge to IPOA executing its oversight mandate. If approved for this appointment, Honorable Kindiki, what steps will you take to ensure that the two institutions work seamlessly for the benefit of Kenyans? And secondly, how will you strengthen IPOA so as to execute its mandate? Second, the Honorable Chair, is about urban criminal gang activities. In the urban areas, particularly in Nakuru, a criminal gang called Confirm, which by what the citizens claim has brought about 5 deaths in every month and hundreds of injuries. Maybe if you're approved and confirmed, what are the steps that you will take to reduce the increase of criminal activities in urban areas, and particularly in Nakuru, specifically the confirmed criminal gang? Thank you, Chair.
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, on the first issue, the relationship between IPOA and the National Police Service is an ongoing conversation, and it's not unusual. It happens all over the world that the police and the bodies oversight them have normal institutional tensions. We have, during our tenure in office, we have encouraged these institutions to work together because each one of them is playing an important role. It is the same problem we had between the police service and the Police Service Commission, and we did a lot of work and around that, and were able to get a win-win situation where the commission and the police service are working together. So we'll apply the same methods if we are reappointed to make sure that IPOA gets the support it requires from the NPS, and going forward we will support IPOA in terms of more resources, more capacity, but also just brokering the institutional goodwill between themselves and the police. The second question, Mr. Speaker, is on the criminal gangs. It is true we have had a gang in Nakuru known as Confirm, and urban crime is a major issue. When I took over as CS for Interior, October 2022, there was a lot of gang violence and gang crime in Nairobi. We've been able to reduce and suppress the Nairobi urban criminal activity significantly. We hope that the Nakuru matter could also be resolved, and before I was dismissed from office, I had a meeting with the leaders of Nakuru County, and we had agreed that according to the feedback the leaders gave us, we needed to change the command, because sometimes many of these performance issues are based on the right command. So we are going to work on it to ensure that we eliminate that gang and other urban gangs in Mombasa and a few other towns that are suffering the same